Hi, today I'd like to tell you about some exciting work published in Nature Medicine in our study entitled Intestinal Microbiota Metabolism of L-Carnitine, a nutrient in red meat, promotes atherosclerosis. This work was performed at the Cleveland Clinic by Bob Keith, an MD PhD student, in the lab of Stan Hazen. My name is Jonathan Smith and I'm a collaborator on these studies. Basically, these studies evolved from our prior studies where we found that choline and phosphatidylcholine, which are high in eggs, promotes the production in the gut of a molecule called TMA, and that's mediated by your gut flora bacteria. And TMA is absorbed and in the liver converted to TMAO. And we found that increased TMAO can cause increased atherosclerosis in mouse models and is associated with increased cardiovascular disease in humans. So, the current study involved another dietary compound, L-carnitine, which is high in red meat and also found in some dietary supplements. So the first study involved humans who were given a steak meal and some L-carnitine in a pill. And what we observed was, with a time lag, we found that TMAO, the deleterious catabolite, appeared in the plasma. However, if these humans were first treated with an antibiotic to wipe out their gut flora, the carnitine challenge no longer led to any TMAO production. But then again, if we waited a month and let their gut flora get reestablished, the dietary challenge again led to the production of TMAO. Then we studied vegans versus omnivores. It turns out that vegans who were given a carnitine challenge had a lot less production of TMAO, indicating that your long-term diet probably changes your gut flora, and the diet in response to long-term eating meat is more susceptible to induction of TMAO levels after the carnitine challenge. Then we studied vegans versus omnivores. It turns out that vegans who were given a carnitine challenge had a lot less production of TMAO, indicating that your long-term diet probably changes your gut flora, and the diet in response to long-term eating meat is more susceptible to induction of TMAO levels after the carnitine challenge. Then we went to our mouse models, and we found the same thing. The feeding carnitine to mouse led to increased plasma levels of TMAO and increased levels of atherosclerosis. However, if the mouse were first treated with antibiotics to get rid of their gut flora, all these effects were reversed. And when we returned to human studies, and we looked at the association of carnitine and TMAO levels in the blood with cardiovascular disease, we found that increased levels of carnitine in the blood were associated with increased levels of cardiovascular disease and peripheral vascular disease, but this was completely taken into account by the levels of TMAO in the blood. So what are the potential implications of this study? First, in addition to saturated fat and cholesterol in the diet, our diet also contains other compounds like choline and L-carnitine, which can be detrimental. Choline and carnitine particularly are metabolized by our gut flora, and it's this gut flora interaction that leads to the eventual production of TMAO, which is again deleterious and can cause atherosclerosis. Choline and carnitine, in addition to components of meat, are also found in supplements and in energy drinks, and so in the future we may want to monitor our consumption of these products. Finally, the gut flora seems to be very important in this process, and so modulating our gut flora through diet or maybe through probiotics may be a future therapeutic way that we can also increase our heart health. So what are the next steps? First, we'd like to learn a lot more about the bacterial enzymes that convert carnitine and choline into TMAO. And then we'd also like to learn more about the good bacteria that don't do that and the bad bacteria that do, and how we can change our bacteria profile in our gut to lead to healthy metabolism. And finally, we need to learn a little bit more about the mechanism by which TMAO causes atherosclerosis. We know that it does have effects on macrophage cholesterol uptake, but we think there might be other mechanisms in addition. Finally, I'd like to give you my take-home message, which is that in addition to saturated fats and cholesterol, we should be concerned about dietary choline and carnitine, as these may lead to production of TMAO and atherosclerosis through a gut flora-mediated process. The idea that we can potentially prevent cardiovascular disease by conditioning our gut to have good flora is a very attractive target, and I think in the future we'll be learning more about that and potential diet or probiotic methods to improve our gut flora for a healthy lifestyle. Thank you.